Welcome back to JavaScript Table. My name is Kushal and today we'll be building a shadow generator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So this is how the application will look like. Here we have a square where we can cast the shadow, and here we have all the features to control the shadows. So we have the X direction, Y direction, blur, spread radius and everything. We also have an option to change the shadow color here. So we can select any color here, and we also can change the background color, so we can change the color to anything we want. And if we don't want the background to be the same color as the square, we can hit this button and this will disable the background. Okay, so and also whenever we change anything, this will update everything to our code down here. So we can just go ahead and copy this one and paste it to our CSS. Okay, so without any delay, let's go to our code and start working on this application. So let's go here and link with our CSS and also with our JavaScript. And now let's go to our body section and create a div called wrapper. And let's also give an ID of wrapper. And now let's create a div with a class name of object container. And inside here we'll say object, and you also give an ID of object as well. Okay, and below here let's create a div with a class name of container or controller, and also give an ID of controller as well. Inside here let's have h1, and this is going to say shadow generator, and after then let's create a control el, and inside here let's have a span, and this is going to say x direction, and below this we're gonna have another div with a class name of input fields. Okay, and here we're going to have a first input, and this one is going to be range, and with a minimum value of -120 and the maximum value of 120 and the value of 8. And it's going to have an ID of x direction. Make sure to use the camel case, and also try to keep the ID name as same as what I've written here. And let's go ahead and keep everything same, but we're going to change the range to say number, and the ID is going to say num at the end because this is a number input. Okay, I'm also going to give a comment here, and this one is going to be x direction. Now let's copy this x direction and paste it here, and this one is going to be y direction. So we can just change the name to say y direction, and everything should be fine. So let's change x to y and x to y, and let's copy or let's paste this another one, and this one is going to be a blur. Change this to blur, and with blur the minimum value is going to be 0 and the maximum value is going to be 75, and the current value is going to be 10 instead of 8, and ID is going to be blur. I'm just going to copy this one here and replace this with the top one, and this one is going to be blur num. So everything else seems pretty good. And right below the blur we have spread radius. Let me copy this And here this one is going to be spread radius. Let's change this to say spread. Okay, and this one is going to have a minimum value of 75 instead of 0, and the current value is going to be just 5, and this one is going to be called spread. Awesome. And this one we have to keep the value same, like minimum value and maximum value of both inputs, because they're going to be synced with each other. So whenever we change one thing, they're going to change, it's going to make an effect on both of them. Okay, and let's change the ID name to say spread num, and make sure you're also using the same ID. You can change it later, but for now just keep the ID name same, because we're going to heavily rely on the ID names. Okay, after the spread radius we have opacity, so we can just copy this one and paste it here, and this one is going to be opacity. And on opacity, our minimum value is going to be 0, and the maximum value is going to be 1, and the current value is going to be 0.75, and this one is going to be opacity. And we also need one more thing here, which is step, and the step is going to be 0.01, because we don't want this to jump by more than 0.01 decimal. Okay, so let's copy this one and paste it right here, and this one is going to be opacity num, just like before. Okay, let's save this one, and right below this one here, let's go ahead and paste, or let's copy this one and paste it right here, and this one is going to be colors. This one is going to be color controls, and here we're going to give an individual class name, which is going to be control color. So let's delete this one for now, and inside of control color we're going to have a div with a class name of shadow color, and inside here we have a span, and this is going to be shadow color. And after that we have a input. Actually, let's wrap this inside of a div, so let's do input fields, and inside here let's have a input, and this one is going to be color with an ID of shadow color, and we're going to give a value of black color. And after this, let's copy this one and paste it right below here, and we're going to change this to text, and this one is going to have num at the end. Okay, let's go ahead and open this up with live server here. Amazing. Okay, so now let's copy this, paste it here, and this one is going to be background color. Let's change this to say background color. And in here, let's change all this shadow to background. And one last thing, the color, the value of color is going to be different for this one. The value of the color is going to be this one right here. So we can just paste it here and paste this one here. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so after this, um, what we have here is the button here. So right below this one here, we can create another div with a class name of control EL, and inside of here, we're going to say control checkbox. Awesome. And inside here, let's create a new div with a class name of let's see, inset, because we are working on inset. And inside here, let's have a span, and this one is going to say inset, and let's have a input, and this is going to have a checkbox and with an ID of inset. Let's copy this one, and let's do the same for the same background, and this one is going to be check background. Let's say same background, and here the ID is going to be check background, and this is going to be checked. So when we say checked, it's going to be checked by default, and that's what I want. Okay, so after this, let's work on this display. So right below here, I'm going to give a comment here, and this one is going to be control checkbox. Right below here, let's work on the display. Here, I'm gonna create a class div with a class name of display container, and inside here, let's have a div with display EL, and inside here, let's have a span with a class of display property, and this is going to say box shadow. And after this span, let's have another span, and this one is going to have a class of display value, and also an ID with display shadow. And we can just copy this one for now, just to have a placeholder. So let's just copy here, paste this one here, and let's go and see what we have. Yeah, and we also need another one for the WebKit. So let's go here and copy the whole display EL, paste it right below here, and we're going to say we're going to change this ID to say WebKit, and it's going to say WebKit display shadow, and here we're going to change this to say WebKit box shadow. Awesome. So I think this is all we have for our HTML. Now to make this video shorter, what I've done is I've already created a CSS file, and you're going to find a link in the description. It's going to take you to GitHub, and you can just go there and copy all the CSS and paste it to your file. So that's what I'm going to do now. So here I'm going to get my CSS and paste it here. So once you paste it here, you're gonna see it's going to adapt the new styles pretty quickly. And here you can go ahead and check all the styles.css, but it's not a lot. It's only around 165 lines. Okay, It's not any hard. I just wanted to make the video shorter. Okay, so now let's jump into our script.js. Okay, so for this one, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to get all of these inputs from query selector. So let's do that. Const inputs equals to dot query selector all, and here I'm going to do input. So this is going to grab all the inputs here. Now uh, we have to give a event listener on the input. So for that we need to use for each. So we can say inputs dot for each, and we're going to target each of them, which is e, and we're going to create an anonymous function, and we're going to give an event listener to each of them. So we can do e dot add event listener, and we're going to listen for any input changes, and we're going to create another anonymous function. Okay, and here we are going to call a new function, and it's going to be called Shadow Generator, and it's going to get a few properties from the input, because we need some of them. So the first one is going to be the ID. We want to get the ID of all the inputs, and we want to get a after ID we need to get their type, and we also need their value, and we need to check if they are checked or not. It's only for these two buttons here, so we can do checked, e.checked. Awesome. So after this, let's go ahead and create this shadow generator. Let's do function shadow generator, and we're going to get ID, type, value, and checked. Let's open this up, and here first thing we're going to do is sync all inputs with each other. So what I mean by that is we're going to be syncing this range with this number. So whenever we make change to one input, it's going to affect the other one. Okay, and similar with the colors. So for that, let's call a function, and this is going to be called sync inputs, and here we're going to pass in ID, type, and value. That's all we're going to pass in here. So let's go down here and let's create a function called sync inputs, and we're going to take in the same things, ID, type, and value. And here let's use if statement, and we're going to search by type, and we're going to get all the range type. And so if the type is range, if the one we're making change is type, then what we want to do is we want to get this number element. We want to get this number element. So for that we can do document dot get elements by ID, and we want to get element or we want to get the ID um, for all of them. So whenever we change one item, we want to change the other one. And if you remember, in our HTML, we have the ID names pretty similar. So if we look for this X direction, the range ID is called X direction, and the number is called X direction num. So we have basically added num at the end for all of the class names or ID names. You can take for any of these. So here we have Y direction, and for number we have Y direction number. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to get the ID of the range, and we simply need to add num at the end. Okay, so if we do that, then we'll be targeting these input numbers, and we want to target their value, and we want to replace their value with the value we're receiving from the range element. If we save this and go ahead and make change to this, you can see we are changing the number here. So whenever we make change to any of these range elements, it's going to make change to the numbers. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the other way around. So whenever if we make any changes to the number, it's going to affect the range. So let's copy this one and paste this one. And for this one, we're going to target the number instead of range. And if you remember, or if you noticed, we already have number at the end for these number elements. So what we need to do is we need to remove the num from the end. So we end up with the range ID, if that makes sense. So for that, let's create a new variable. We're going to call it ID name, and this is going to be ID dot. We're going to slice it from the backside and minus 3 letters. So we're basically removing last 3 letters. And now here, instead of just ID, we're going to make it ID name. So if we go ahead and save this here and make change to this one here, you can see we're also changing the range element, and this will work for all of it. Awesome. So now let's go ahead and do the same for shadow colors. Okay, so we can just go ahead and copy and paste, and we're going to be targeting the color inputs. And for this one, actually we can target the text, and this will work just fine. And let's copy this one, paste it here. And for this one, we're going to make it color. And if we save this, then we should be able to, yeah, they're all synced with each other, as you can see. And if I copy this text here, or the hex code, and paste it here, yeah, it's going to grab it. We need to store all of their values, we need to so for that one, we can create a object and store all of their values. So here we can do const, we can say shadow equals to an object, and this is going to store x direction, and x direction is by default 8, y direction is also 8, and the blur is 10, and we have spread radius, and that is 5, and we have the opacity, and that is 0.75. Okay, and we have the color, shadow color, and that is going to be by default the black color, and we have the background color, and the background color is, I'm just going to copy from here and paste it right here. Okay, and we're going to have the inset, and inset is going to be false, and we have the check background, and this is going to be true. Awesome. So whenever so let's go to our shadow generator, and let's update all of these object key value whenever if we make any changes to the inputs, whether it's color, range, or numbers, it's going to update that in this object. Okay, so for that, let's go ahead and let's do shadow the shadow properties. So for that, we can do shadow dot, or we can grab it this way here. Since they are going to have the same ID name, we can just do shadow, and we can target the key by their ID, or this ID in this case, and it's going to be similar to this one, these names. So whichever we're getting, we can just do this to their value. Okay, and we can also change the checked one. Okay, so here we can just go here and we can do if type is equal to checked, or checkbox actually. Then what we want is shadow, and we want to target it by their ID equals to value, or in this case check. If this is checked, because if we do value, the value is not going to give us true or false. Only checked will give us true or false. So, and sometimes when we do this, it should be able to update the key value in this object, but sometimes it can have a bug. So for that one, what we can do is we can copy this code and we can paste it onto every if else from sync inputs. So we can go to the bottom and then we can just paste them here and change the ID on these two. So on the one that we have created a ID name, we can just do ID name instead of just ID. So even also on this one we have ID name, we can just copy and paste this one here. Awesome. And if we go to our shadow generator, go below here, if we go below here and if we console.log shadow and save this one here and go to our inspect, go to console and change any of these, you can see we get all the updated ones. And if we go ahead and open this one here, you can see that I changed the spread radius to 7, and so you can see it has the spread radius, or actually let's go ahead and do that. This is not updating all any of these. We can change the blur, we can change the white direction, X direction, opacity. We are not changing the spread radius. I think we have the different ID name. So if we go to our code and go to spread radius, oh, here we have the spread, and I probably changed the spread radius. Yeah, if we remove this radius and save this here and change the spread radius, you can see it's updating right here, and this is going to work for all of it. We're changing all of these. Awesome. So now let's go below here, and what we need to do now is if you look at this app here we have the RGBA code here instead of hex, because we cannot give the opacity to hex, so we have to convert the hex code to RGBA. So for that one, let's go ahead and create another function here. So I'm just going to create a function, and this one is going to be called hex to RGBA, and this is we're going to receive a color and opacity. And here let's do r equals to parse int, and we'll say color dot sub str. Here we'll say 1, 2, and 16, and we'll do rg, and actually let's just copy and paste this one here, and we're going to change this map to const. My bad. const, and let's change this to G, and this one is going to be 3. Yeah, this one is going to be 3, and this one is going to be 5, and we can change this R to GB. Okay, and we're also going to change the background color to RGBA, so we'll be using this function twice. So for that one, but only we're going to pass opacity only once for the shadow color. But for the background color, if we go over here and change the background to anything, as you can see, like this one is more brighter or more vibrant than the background color, and that's because we have if we go to inspect here and go to elements, here you can see the background color is RGBA instead of hex, and it has the opacity of 0.9, and this one is static. So if we change the color to anything else, it's going to convert hex to RGBA and add 0.9 of opacity. Okay, so to make that work, we're only going to pass opacity for the shadow color, and here we can do const RGBA, and we can use the ternary operator. So we can just say opacity. If the opacity is passed, then we want to uh, give a RGBA and get the opacity from this one up here. And if the opacity is not passed, then we're going to um, have the static opacity of 0.9, and that's for the background. So here we can do RGBA, and this one is going to be R G B, and for A it's going to be the opacity. Okay, and if we don't have the opacity included, then what we want is, let's copy this one, paste it here, but instead of this opacity we're going to have a static 0.9 opacity. Okay, now let's go ahead and return this RGBA. Awesome. So now let's go to our shadow generator, and let's go to our shadow generator, and here let's get colors. So on the colors, here we can create a variable, and we'll say shadow color RGBA equals to hex to RGBA, and we're going to pass shadow dot shadow color, and we're also going to pass in shadow dot opacity. Okay, and now we're going to copy this one, paste it here, and this one is going to be background color, and we don't want to pass in the opacity, so we're only passing shadow color, or in this case this one is going to be background color. Okay, so after we have the colors, let's go ahead and let's create a template for shadow. So let's basically create this one right here so that we can update it. So let's go here, and we'll say template for shadow, and here let's do const shadow, we'll say normal shadow, so shadow normal equals to this one is going to have the shadow dot x direction, and we have to put pixel at the end, or px, otherwise it's not going to work. So here we can do shadow again dot y direction pixel at the end, and we have to do shadow, and now we're getting the blur, and we can do pixel at the end, and here let's do shadow again, dot, and this time we're getting sprayed. We have to put pixel at the end, and now we're getting the shadow color RGBA. So here we can go ahead and create this one and just paste it here. Okay, so let's see if this works or not. Let's do console.log, and we can just do shadow normal. Let's pass in shadow normal and see if this works. So let's go to our console and make a change here. As you can see here, we have the shadow coming up right here. So that is working. Let's go ahead and create this backdrop shadow here. So for that one, we can just copy this one, copy the whole thing, and give a comma, paste it right there inside the same string. But make sure to separate it with one comma. And on this one, we're going to change the direction. So instead of positive direction, we want to do the negative direction. So just put minus in front of X direction, okay? And also to Y direction, okay? If you save this one here, and on this one, we want the shadow color to be white, and this is not going to be relied upon this shadow color that we can choose. So this one is whatever we choose, it's only going to work on the actual shadow. The backdrop is going to be white. Okay, so for that one we can do RGBA. Here we will select white color 255 255, and on opacity now we'll be accessing the shadow dot opacity, and we're going to minus 0.15 because we don't want this as vibrant as this shadow. We want this less vibrant, and just a backdrop there. Okay, so this is going to be a normal shadow. So if we go ahead and console log this one as well, let's go ahead and do this and do shadow normal. Let's set this. Go, come to our browser, go to console and make a change anywhere. As you can see here, we can see we have two different shadows here. The first one is the positive one, and this one is going to be the black shadow, or whatever color we choose, and this one is going to be the static white color, and this is going to be also changed, but they're going to be opposite. So if we have the positive 16 pixel for the black shadow or the normal shadow, it's going to have a minus 16 pixels, so they're going apart each other. Okay, so after that, let's also create let's copy this one, go down here and paste it, and this one is going to be shadow inset. Okay, so for that one, we can just come here and we'll just say inset at the beginning of each sentence. So right after the comma, right before the negative shadow X direction, just put inset here, and that should work. Okay, so after this, let's go ahead and grab our elements from index.html. So here what we want here is we want the wrapper, for the background. We want the object, that's going to be the main object here. We also want the controller, and we also need these two display properties, display display shadow and the display shadow as well. So let's go to our script.js and start working on that. So we'll first grab the wrapper. That's going to be document dot get elements by ID, and this one is going to be just wrapper, and let's go ahead and copy this one paste this a few times, and this one is going to be um, object. Let's change this to object as well. This one is going to be controller. Let's also change this to controller. And this one is going to be, I'm just going to go down here and copy this display shadow here. Control V and Control V here. Let's copy and paste here. And this one is going to be, I think, WebKit display shadow. Copy this one, paste it here. So now we have everything that we need to get access from index. So let's go down here right below this template for shadows, and here we'll say adding styles. So let's go down here and give the style. And actually, before we do that, we still need to do one last thing for the shadow. So we need to select, we need to get the inset value, if it's pressed or not, and we need to switch between the shadow normal and shadow inset. So for that one, we can just do const shadow. Let's call this shadow property equals to, let's do shadow dot inset. If it is true, then what we want is we want the shadow inset. We want this shadow inset, and if it's false, then we want this shadow normal. Okay, so now that's going to switch between inset or not. So let's go ahead and add the shadow. So first of all, we're going to add shadow to our object. So let's go to our object dot style dot shadow, or let's do box shadow equals to our shadow property. And let's see if this works or not. Okay, there we go. Now we can see the shadow property right here, or the shadow working. But whenever we refresh this and before we change anything, we can't see the shadow. So to make sure that it will load, the shadow will be loaded before we make any changes, we can just go above the function and we'll call the shadow generator before the event listener does. So this is going to be already there. Okay, so let's go down here and let's get access to our controller, and we'll do the same thing. We'll do style dot box shadow equals to shadow property. If we go ahead and save this one, now we have the shadow for both of them. Okay, and we also want the background color for all of them. So what we can do is, let's go and do object dot styles dot background color equals to shadow dot background color. If we save this, now we have the default color here. And for the main background color to be same, let's go ahead and target our wrapper, and we'll say dot, or we actually have to check for this tick. So here we can do if shadow dot check background. If it is true, then we want the background. So we'll say wrapper dot style dot background color. is equals to shadow, or this in this case for the background, because we want the static 0.9 opacity, we have already created this color here, which is background color RGBA. So we're going to grab that, come down here and paste this here. So if we save this, now we have the background color. And when we change, we need to have a fallback. Let's have a else, and this one is going to be, let's copy and paste this one here, and this one is going to be hashtag or string hashtag FFFFF. So this is going to be white color. So if we uncheck this, now we have the white color, and if we check this, it's going to have the background color, and if we check the inside button, it's going to have the shadow inside, and if we uncheck this, it's going to have the shadow offset, right? So that works. Now the last thing we have left is to update this display section here. So we can just go down here and create just go ahead and do that. So we'll say updating display. We can just grab the display from here. We'll say display shadow, come down here, paste this dot inner HTML is equals to the shadow property. But for this one, we're going to make a tick here because we also need to add these ones here, the colon, I think, the colon and this one here. So for that one, we're going to do this and that. Now, my bad. Okay, if we do this now, we are updating all the shadow properties. So whenever we make any changes, it's going to make changes on the box shadow. So let's do the same thing for the WebKit. Copy this, bring it down, paste it here. Let's do inner HTML equals to backtick colon, and we'll get shadow property, and we'll do this. Okay, so whenever we make any changes, it's going to make effect on here. So I think that's all we have for today. The last thing is to deploy this application. Search for netlify.com in Google and click the first link and log in or sign up if you haven't already. And once you log in or sign up to there, you'll be brought to similar page like this one. And on this one, you have to go to sites, and here it'll ask you to drag and drop the file you want to deploy. So go to your file explorer. I have mine open right here. So I'm just gonna bring it here, and here I have a shadow generator. I'll just drag and drop here, and you can go to site setting and you can change the name. So for this one, I'm going to say amazing shadow generator, and let's save this one. And here you can see your file is online, so you can share this link to anyone and they'll be able to find your application. Okay, so that's all for today. I'll be back tomorrow with new project, so make sure to like, subscribe, and have a good day.